Hello, Packers fans, wherever you may be. It's time for another edition of the Pack Attack Cast. We're continuing our series on ramping up for free agency, the draft. As they say at training camp, it all starts here. Well, we are starting out 2026 here. 2025 is being settled this weekend at the Super Bowl, but we're already on to the next year for your Green Bay Packers. Wanted to talk about a couple decisions the Packers have to make before free agency. Believe me, free agency will be here before you know it. So I'm very excited about free agency. Brian Gutekunst had a presser today. We're going to try to weave in some of the things that we got from that presser on this discussion today. I already have a number of topics I want to talk about today. Want to talk about roster decisions that Brian Gutekunst and the coaching staff have to make before the start of free agency. And I also want to take a look at the salary cap. I've been playing around with the salary cap over the last couple days, trying to figure out how the Packers can make the most of this year and next year, because I think those are the two best windows for the Packers to win a championship before we start looking at the repercussions of the Jordan Love contract as well as the Micah Parsons contract as those contracts start to snowball and get bigger and bigger. 26 and 27 are really the best opportunities for the Green Bay Packers to get not only a division title, which we're still waiting for after the collapse last year, but also a Super Bowl championship season and a return of the Lombardi Trophy where it belongs in Green Bay. Those of us who regularly go to Green Bay and see the Lambeau Field Stadium, as well as the museum, know that there's always space for another Lombardi Trophy there. So let's try to get one in the next couple years. So with that in mind, before we get started, I want to thank everybody again for the growth for this channel. We've got to 16,500 subs, which is 3 times what I expected to get in my first year of this channel. So thank you to everyone for that. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that sub button. And if you already are a sub and you like this content, hit that like button because it helps other people discover the channel. So let's talk about some decisions that the Packers need to make going into free agency, especially with regard to the salary cap. So let's go down a list of players that I really think the Packers need to look at getting creative with and making some tough decisions as well for some of these players. So first of all, Lucas Van Ness, the Packers have the ability to take a $15 million option for 2027. And a lot of people are on the fence with Lucas Van Ness. I know for a first-round pick, the results have been mixed to say the least. There's been some injuries. There's been challenges with getting onto the field and making a true impact. But I think we saw enough from Lucas Van Ness the last 2 seasons to decide that the Packers need to take that option for the $15 million and add an additional year to Lucas Van Ness. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one, I still think he's an ascending player, and I think most likely next year he is going to be the running mate for Micah Parsons. And we're going to talk about why I think that's going to be further down this list. But having your number 2 defensive end or possibly outside linebacker, we're going to talk about that as well, if the Packers switch over to a 3-4, Lucas Van Ness is actually a really good fit, whether you want him to be a defensive end in a 4-3 or if you want him to be an outside linebacker in a 3-4. He really does have the unique athletic profile to actually fit both of those roles really well. Now, we know from the press conference today, Brian Gutekunst was very hesitant to decide whether they were going to stay with a 4-3 or switch to a 3-4. And either way, Lucas Van Ness really fits either one of those styles with his physical profile, his athletic abilities. So I really think it's a no-brainer. As much as a lot of people are saying he hasn't produced enough, I disagree, because when you're looking at deals for players, it's not what they've done in the past, it's what you see ahead of them. And in 2026 and 2027, I see Lucas Van Ness being a big part of this defense, regardless of whether they switch to a 3-4. And that's why Lucas Van Ness, you're paying for his potential and what he's going to do in the future, much like we pay for Jordan Love right now for his future potential as an MVP. So I would argue Lucas Van Ness, the option needs to be picked up for 2027 for $15 million. And we're going to take a look at how that will impact the salary cap later on in the stream. Next up is Devontae Wyatt. While he was hurt a lot of last year and the Packers really felt his absence when he was not in the starting lineup, all indications is that Watt will be available for the start of training camp. And I really think right now he's on a extension, $12 million, and I would like to see the Packers extend that for an additional year for a couple of reasons. Number one, Wyatt is not going to want to play on a one-year deal. And number two, I think Wyatt has the potential to really continue to grow as a player, and I think extending him an additional year is going to be a smart decision for the Green Bay Packers. And I'd like to see them do that while he's injured right now, because one of the Packers' strengths when they're looking at contracts, and you saw it last year with Christian Watson, they got a great extension with Christian Watson even though while he was injured, and that really is going to pay off big dividends. So I'd like to see them extend Watt for at least one more year and find a way to make that contract make sense. Will it be at the price point of $12 million? Maybe they can get a hometown injury discount and get an additional year of Wyatt and maybe reduce his salary cap cost for this year to maybe the $8 to $10 million range, which would give them a lot of flexibility. It would give Wyatt some long-term safety and comfort that in the event of an injury, he's going to have some protection. I really make sure it makes a lot of sense all the way around. Next on my list is Sean Ryan. He is an unrestricted free agent. But I do believe if the Packers make an aggressive offer early in free agency, they can re-sign Ryan. There's a lot of reasons to do this. Number one, he played exceptionally well as a center. He was thrown into the fire, and he played above what I expected for a player thrown in with no notice as a starting center. If he has the training camp and mini camps to adjust more to the position, I think Sean Ryan can be a very effective center for the Packers for the next 2 to 3 years. And I think you can get him for about anywhere between $5 million and $7 million with a team-friendly deal. I think that really makes a lot of sense. He is obviously going to compete for the center role, and he'll probably have it unless we sign someone else or draft someone else. In addition to that, he is an excellent guard depth piece. So those reasons alone make it very reasonable to sign him to a $5 to $7 million contract for 2 to 3 years. And I think that's a big thing that Brian Gutekunst needs to jump on at the start of free agency. The center market is not a great market in free agency this year. Certainly not for the players that the Packers can afford. So bringing Sean Ryan back into the fold quickly at the start of free agency, I think is something that the Packers should really look at because he's going to be a key part of the future. Quay Walker. Quay Walker is a very divisive linebacker, and there's a lot of fans that feel like they should move on from Quay Walker. But we saw Brian Gutekunst during the season this year state that they would like to bring Quay Walker back. Especially if you're transitioning to a 3-4, you're going to need quality linebackers on this team. Quay Walker is a quality linebacker, and I actually think he might be more successful in a 3-4 than he is in a 4-3. So I would suggest that the Packers look to bring back Quay Walker as long as it's at a price point of $9 million or less for 2 or 3 years. I think that's really a smart move for the Green Bay Packers because, again, when I look at the personnel and I look at Gannon's, the new defensive coordinator, Gannon's experience, he really does have a preference for a 3-4 alignment. And having Quay Walker available for that alignment is really going to be big for the Packers. Next up on my list is Tucker Kraft. I would like to see him extended. I think that the fact that he's coming off an ACL injury and the fact that he really values being a Green Bay Packer, I think you can try to get a team-friendly deal for Tucker Kraft. Looking at the research I was able to put together, I think a 3-year, $42 million contract is about where you need to be for Tucker Kraft to have a long-term extension. You would strap that on additional years from this year. So you'd want to push that salary cap out to 27, 28, 29 for the $42 million. If you can do that for 3 years, $42 million, I think that will be a steal for Tucker Kraft. And I think the Packers should really look at doing that while he's recovering from an injury. Again, a lot of people might say that's kind of a shady thing to do, but the reality is you're taking a risk that Tucker Kraft will exceed that $42 million value, but we're taking on the injury risk of him coming back from an ACL. So I think it's a real win-win when you have a highly valued player that's coming off of an injury to find a way to get an extension done. Christian Watson, I'd also like to see him get a 2 to 3 year extension. If they did 3 years, if you look at the market right now, I think that again would probably be around $42, $43 million for a 3-year extension for Christian Watson, and I think that would be a smart move for the Green Bay Packers. Now we're going to try to look at some of the downsides of trying to create that money for all of these extensions that I've just referenced. Rashawn Gary needs to be cut by this team. It's going to be a pre-June 1st cut. I fully expect that will happen. You take some of that money and put it into some of these other players because Rashawn Gary is out of his prime as a defensive end. In addition to that, if you are switching to a 3-4, he really doesn't fit as a defensive end in a 3-4 either. He's a little undersized. He doesn't have that penetrating ability that he used to have in the past. So I think Rashawn Gary, it's time to cut and run and take some of those financial resources and put it into other players. Elton Jenkins, also I predict will be a pre-June 1st cut. That is a 100% savings for the Packers because he does not have any guaranteed money in his contract. And again, you throw that money into other players that can help him. The truth of the matter is Elton Jenkins has been on a decline for the last 2 or 3 years. They tried the center position as a possible solution. It did not work. He's coming off of significant injury. It's time to say goodbye to Elton Jenkins. And, the fact that he did a hold in at the start of training camp really doesn't lend itself to the team trying to find a solution here. I think it's best to just cut and run on Elton Jenkins. Brandon McManus was on my list for this discussion until I saw the press conference today. My initial thought was that Brandon McManus was going to be a cut. But looking at what we saw from Brian Gutekunst in the press conference today, I think Brandon McManus is going to stick with this team at least through a training camp competition, and that will be interesting to watch. Isaiah McDuffie, he played great for us last year, but I don't think he's a fit for the Packers going forward, especially if they switch to a 3-4, which is going to require linebackers that have the ability to also do well in coverage, which is not McDuffie's strong suit. So I think Isaiah McDuffie is probably going to be a cap casualty, probably a June 1st cut for Isaiah McDuffie. It's time for us to look at other linebackers, either that are on the roster or possibly in the draft, because it looks like this is going to be a deep draft for linebackers. So I think we could do better than Isaiah McDuffie and put that salary cap money into other places. Also, a lot of people have been talking about trading away Bullard based on the theory that we have a lot of good safeties. Maybe it's time to cash him in for either a draft pick or possibly a player trade. But if we are moving to a 3-4, especially with Gannon really likes to use more safeties in his cover, his quarter shell. So we might see Bullard even more valuable for the Packers in the future. So I would suggest we keep Bullard versus trading him away. Another key thing that we got out of Brian Gutekunst's discussion today was he felt that the corners actually played really well. He went out of his way to praise Keyshawn Nixon. He went out of his way to say that the corners that played for us played very well. That tells me that he's not looking to add a free agent corner. Probably we're going to look at corner in the draft for future draft and develop, but he does not feel we need to make major changes at the corner position. So we could take that off of our to-do list for free agency. I think that's more of a draft task, which we'll talk as we get closer to the draft about. But I tend to agree with him that especially if the Packers are moving more to a quarters coverage system, our existing corners plus some additions in the draft can probably make do in the secondary, especially again if Gannon tries to use more safeties in his coverage scheme. With all the safeties that the Packers have, it's one of the biggest strengths that the Packers have on the current roster. So I think we can probably make do with the corners we have plus some additions in the draft. So look for them to do that. Now, the biggest thing I see in free agency, and Brian didn't really want to talk about the change from a 3-4 or staying with a 4-3. But either way, the biggest hole that the Packers had on defense, in my opinion, was the ability to stop the run consistently. We are undersized at the defensive tackle position. So whether we switch to a 3-4 and have to bring in a nose tackle, or we have to beef up defensive tackle, we need to look to do that either in free agency or in a trade, because I think those big bodies are going to be hard to find after the first round of the NFL draft. And it's really important to understand, and I think Gannon's going to have to make this decision, whether they're going to telegraph it or not, of the 4-3 or a 3-4 front, is there are just very few players that are big enough to play nose tackle in the NFL and take on double teams. Now, one of the players we do have on the roster, which would be Nazir Stackhouse, actually does have the build to be a nose tackle of the future, but I think he needs a couple years to develop. So I would like to see the Packers make a decision before free agency about whether they're serious about switching to a 3-4. If so, they're going to have to hit the nose tackle front very aggressively at the start of free agency. So part of Brian Gutekunst's press conference here, I think, was maybe to throw people off that the Packers are really in the market for a true nose tackle. But I think more likely than not, we're looking at a complete switch to a 3-4 defense. And in a future video later this week, I'm going to start talking about what the Packers would look like as a 3-4. It's a very interesting concept. I do actually think we have some pieces that would actually fit really well in a 3-4. I think Micah Parsons is tailor-made for a 3-4 front. I think Lucas Van Ness can actually play very well as an outside linebacker in a 3-4 system. So I think the pieces are actually there, and we'll talk about that in another video. Now what I want to do is take a few minutes to take a look at the salary cap with some of these discussions in mind. So let's switch over to our salary cap here. Let's switch over here. All right, first and foremost, when you're looking at this, don't look at this 14 million in the red number and be concerned, because I've actually done some extensions that have resulted in that minus 13 million, but we're going to address those salary cap issues right now. So let's just jump right into it. Ignore these players in green and yellow right here. These are players that I've extended, and we're going to get to that once we take a look at players that we're going to cut to get that salary cap where I think it needs to be. All right? So we're going to start with Rashawn Gary here. I said it's going to be a pre-6-1 cut, so we're going to go ahead and cut Rashawn Gary. We're going to submit that. That gets us down significantly in the salary cap. We do have a dead cap of 17 million, but we are going to be saving almost 11 million that we can use for other players. And I think it's time to say goodbye to Rashawn Gary. A lot of people are saying that we should cut Aaron Banks. I am not in that camp. I actually think with the changes for the offensive line, I think we are stuck at least this year with Aaron Banks returning. Now, next year, it's actually much easier to move on from Aaron Banks. So we're going to keep Aaron Banks for 2026. We are not going to make a change to Micah Parsons, of course. We are going to cut Elton Jenkins here, pre-June 1st cut. We're going to submit that. That instantly gets us to almost 18 million in salary cap room. Now, we're going to need that salary cap room for other things that we're going to do in free agency, as well as signing our rookies. So hold on to that concept. We're not going to touch Micah Parsons. We're not going to touch Xavier McKinney. We're not going to touch Josh Jacobs. Now, one of the things here is I did extend Devontae Wyatt for an additional year and got his base salary and cap number down to 10 million for 2026. I extended him a year, and we're going to address most of the additional cost of that additional year in 2027. Nate Hobbs, we are not going to make a change. I think Nate Hobbs, despite some of the challenges he had this year while he was injured, still is worth keeping on the roster at that cap number, because it's really hard to find starting corners for that amount. So we're going to keep Nate Hobbs. Of course, we're not going to touch Zach Tom. Keyshawn Nixon continues to be a significant value at just under $7 million per season. some people don't love Keyshawn Nixon, but at that price, he needs to stay on this roster. Next up, Christian Watson. I built in an extension for him for 3 years for $42 million. Most of that cap hit is going to come up in 27, 28, and 29. So I'm very excited that we're going to save some money with Christian Watson there. Lucas Van Ness, this number here assumes he's going to play on his 2026 number, and we're going to add that 15 million number to 2027, unless we do a complete restructuring, which I think they're just going to take the option, add the 15 million into 2027. Brandon McManus, he is going to stay. That's what I'm taking from Brian Gutekunst's press conference today. So we're going to leave him in our salary cap number. Isaiah McDuffie is going to be a pre-June 1st cut. We're going to submit that. That's going to save us a significant amount of money for other uses. We're going to not touch Matthew Golden. We're not going to touch Jordan Morgan. We're not going to touch Donatavian Wicks. Next up here is Carl Brooks, which is an opportunity for us to save some money. Carl Brooks is a little undersized, especially if we are going to switch to a 3-4. He doesn't fit as an end or a tackle in a 3-4 front. So we're actually going to make Carl Brooks a pre-June 1st cut. That's going to save us some additional money here. We're not going to touch Carrington Valentine, Luke Musgrave, Dalen Whalen. We're not going to make any significant cuts here because all of the players from this point on are actually significant values. So we're going to stand pat there. Going up to the top of the list here, I did a $1 million restricted free agent tender to Kamal Haddon. I think he's worth keeping on the roster for $1 million. Same thing with Donovan Jennings here. We're going to keep him for $1 million on the roster. Darian Kennard gets the restricted free agent tender of $3.5 million. Bo Melton is going to stay on the roster for $1 million. I think he continues to be a significant value to this roster. Also factored in here, I have extended Sean Ryan for 3 years. Most of that cost is going to fall into 27 and 28, which is very common for the structure for Packer long-term contracts. Quay Walker here is going to have a $9 million per year cost for 2 years. So we're going to do a 2-year extension for Quay Walker at $9 million per year. What that leaves us with, salary cap space wise, is $25 million. Now you have to take about $8 million of that out for your rookies. You want to save at least $8 million for for a rainy day fund. Lost my train of thought there for a second. So we're going to take $8 million out of that 25, set it aside for the rookies. You're going to take another $8 million for your rainy day fund. And what that will leave you is, I think, enough money to go after a starting caliber nose tackle in free agency. We're going to have another video where I take a look at what a 3-4 would look like for the Packers. In that video, I'm also going to take a look at the possible candidates in free agency to be a nose tackle. Because the more I look at this roster, the more I feel that the base defense needs to transition to a 3-4. And if we spend a significant amount of money in free agency to get a true nose tackle, then I think this roster can quickly convert over to a 3-4 for the future. So that's this edition of the Pack Attack Cast. We took a look at some key personnel decisions the Packers need to make before free agency, and I took a careful look at how we can address our salary cap issues both for this year and in the future, and have a bright 2026 and 2027 for the Green Bay Packers roster. So hope you enjoyed the video. Once again, subscribe if you haven't already done so, or hit that like button if you're a returning fan of this stream. And we'll be back in a couple days to take a look at what the Packers would look like in a 3-4 defense, and also look at candidates for that nose tackle position, because I think if we switch to a 3-4, we 100% have to find a nose tackle. And even if we stay with a 4-3, which I don't think is very likely, I think we still have to beef up the defensive tackles. So we'll take a look at true defensive tackles and take a look at that big run stuffer we would need if we transition to a 3-4. As always, go Pack Go. We'll see you with the next video.